What is up, YouTube? HPJ here, and I am coming at you guys with the only GOAT control. More so of GOAT chaos, if you will. This is, of course, a remnant to the old GOAT format. And yeah, I know, it took me a long period of time to try to muster up the stuff to do this. But I am still missing cards, so if you're wondering where some of the big cards are that are supposed to be in the extra deck for the mini metamorphosis I'm supposed to run, they're not here. I could go into a long explanation of what GOAT format is and the whole thing of that, but I'll say that for the last part of the video, or when I start explaining things in the deck, because I've been trying to record this like crazy, and it has not been easy to record, so yeah, I'm sure many of you can understand, because I like to ramble. So, while we go ahead and we get into this, and just before I do get into it, like I said earlier, because cards are very limited and some cards are very expensive because of how old they are, I don't have everything. So if you're wondering where Kaiku is, if you're wondering where Exile Universe is, they're not, not Exile Universe, Exile Force is. That's because I just don't have them. And as you can see, my fusion deck is very small, but still has some uses to it. So, with that said, let's get into it. So we're going to start off with the monster lineup, and yeah, there's a lot of monsters in this deck. We have, of course, the star runner of the show, Blackluster Soldier, the envoy of the beginning. Then we have Air Knight Parshaft, Ashura Priest, Blade Knight, DD Warrior Lady, and 2 copies of Magician of Faith. For the dark monsters, we have 1 Demok, 1 Jinzo, 1 Exorian Universe, 1 Breaker the Magical Warrior, 1 Mystic Tomato, 1 Tsukuyomi, 1 Spirit Reaper, 1 Sangan. Then for the non-dark monsters, I have 1 Tribe Infecting Virus and 1 Sinister Serpent. So that is it for all of the monsters. We're going to now go into the spell cards. Hold on, I want to make sure everything is together. Alright. Now going on into the spells. We have the 2 copies of Scapegoat, 2 copies of Nobleman of Crossout. I have 1 Metamorphosis, 1 Graceful Charity, 1 Pot of Greed, 1 Delinquent Duo, 1 Confiscation, 1 Brain Control, 1 Snatch Steal, 1 MST, 1 Heavy Storm, 1 Giant Trunade, 1 Premature Burial, and 1 Book of Moon. For the traps, 1 Ring of Destruction, 1 Twister, 1 Call, 1 Saku, 1 Mirror, 1 Torrential, and 1 Trap Hole. So that is it for all the cards. That is a total of 40 in the main deck. And then for the little bit of fusion deck that I have, because at that time it was called Fusion Deck, I have my 1 lone Thousand's Eyes Restrict, my Darkland Fire Dragon, my Dark Fire Dragon, not my Darkland Fire Dragon, 1 Dark Boulder the Terrible, 1 the Fiend Skull Dragon, 1 Ryu Senshi, and 2 copies of Reaper on the Nightmare. So that is it for all of the cards themselves. And while we go into it, so just as a good glimpse of what things were at that time, GOAT format, as it's known, is a combination of the strategy of using your scapegoats to use Metamorphosis to then tribute those goat monsters to then summon your Thousand's Eyes Restrict from your extra deck. Thousand's Eyes Restrict would then take a monster your opponent controls regardless of position and equip itself to it. Then you would play a monster in the deck known as Tsukuyomi, because I should be actually showing these cards off, but I don't want to ruin everything. To then be able to flip that Thousand's Eyes Restrict face down, and then be able to flip it back up to take another monster. While Tsukuyomi himself goes back into the hand. So he's saying herself. Sorry. Play a lot of games where Tsukuyomi is male or female, so it very hard to differ. So because of that situation, Tsukuyomi would go back to your hand, and then you would be able to repeat this process. There are a lot of cards that definitely took advantage of things, because at that time, Konami decided to make a forbidden section of its list. Yeah, that's right, forbidden section. Where the first 17 cards in the game were deemed so powerful in the game that they had to be banned. Some of them were your favorites, like Dark Hole, Raigeki, Harpie's Feather Duster, Witch of the Black Forest, Cyberjar, and many, many more. So that left a good trader pool of things to either be one of two things. You could be Goat Control, which took advantage of the strategy you just told you, or you could be Chaos, and then ring in the field using light and dark monsters. There are various decks that you can find online, and even a website that's dedicated to Goat format and even Chaos format, so where you guys can check out those lists and see how things are ran there. Now, while we go into it, let's go into my version of it, which basically took advantage of both being a goat and a chaos formed deck, while also still trying to pin to a lot of those things in the game. So I don't know everything about that format because honestly, I did not play that format. I was playing the video games that came out around that time. But I think before the game changed into chaos, I was actually, what was I doing at that point? Oh no, I was playing Pokemon. I was playing a lot of Pokemon. So yeah. Alright, so with that, we go on to, of course, the exclusive boss monster of the Chaos deck, and that is Blackluster Soldier, the Envoy of the Beginning. BLS, as he's known, can be summoned by banishing a light and a dark monster from your graveyard to then summon him from your hand. That's right. Monsters that you can summon without having to tribute or use a ritual spell or a polymerization. So with BLS, he has two abilities, but you can only use one of those abilities per turn, and he cannot attack after he's used his first one, which is to target one monster in your opponent's side of the field and banish it. But he cannot attack the turn he uses that effect. Then his second effect is if he does battle and destroys a monster, you can then attack another monster. You can then attack twice. You can attack again in a row. So to better explain that, basically if BLS attacked the monster and he destroyed it, he can attack again. And that was one of the ways for BLS to take out things, or even take out a monster that was in the way, and then inflict battle damage to the opponent. So yeah, BLS was definitely a force to be reckoned with, to the point where he had to be limited. He did end up eventually getting banned right before or around 2006, and then came back miraculously 6 years later. Was it 6 years or 5 years? 5 years later, as part of the wave of chaos that was to ensue at that point in time. Because, oh boy, light monsters were definitely being a star of the show, and BLS was definitely not making it any easier. Because I remember when BLS got unbanned. Actually, I remember when the Gold Series reprinted BLS, and everybody was like, why is BLS here? They're not unbanning BLS. They're not thinking of it. And they surely did. Right in the middle of the summer of 2011, they unbanned BLS. Oh, trust me, it was crazy, that format. Then we have one Air Knight Chef, who's simply here as a light target, and a monster who does piercing battle damage. And then whenever he inflicted battle damage to your opponent, you drew one card. Yeah, Air Knight Chef was that much of a force to be reckoned with too, because Chef's ability to not only inflict damage to your opponent, through destroying attacking a monster in defense, but was able to give you some draw power as well. Parsha was definitely good against cards like Marshmallow and Spirit Reaper, because even though they can be destroyed by battle, that piercing battle damage definitely helped do some numbers. We have Ashura Priest, which was here to help you clear out the goats that were on the field, or just a larger portion of monsters, because Ashura Priest's ability is that it can attack every monster on the field in a row. And if your opponent did summon a monster back, you were just able to swing at it again because, well, it's another monster coming to the board. The thing about Ashura Priest was not only was a light target for BLS if it happened to be in the grave, but it was just an easy monster to play around with. You couldn't special summon it again because, of course, spirit monsters cannot be special summoned. So, yeah, that was the only thing there. And it's one of the two spirit monsters we played in the deck. Blade Knight was another low-level monster that you could play around with because it's a light monster. Hold on 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Blade Knight was another axis of light monsters you can use, but Blade Knight had another unique ability, where when it destroyed a monster by battle that was a flip effect monster, it negated the effect. So because of stuff that was going around, like Magician of Faith, Man-Eater Bug, Hane, and what was that monster's name? Oh, Penguin Soldier. Yeah, this was a monster that helped you deal with that in those annoying flip effects. Also, if you had one or fewer cards in your hand, this thing came in 2K beat stick. So, yeah, definitely a monster to play with if you're playing Goat. And I believe at that time, too, Blade Knight was also in a collectible 10. So if you bought the 10, you're basically buying another part of your GOAT format deck. Then we have DD Warrior Lady. She was one of the many of the different Dimension series cards that got printed. Her name was just shortened because DD was very hard to print. I think they even did that on a couple of monsters and then regretted it, so they just shortened it to DD. So DD Warrior Lady ability is that if she battles a monster, you have the option to banish her and the monster that she battled with. So most people would banish stuff like Sangan, the Spirit Reapers, even the Marshmallowings, just because those were the cards that you had to deal with, because, yeah, those were cards you could not get over in normal means. So, unless you had spot removal at that point, which was very scarce, DD Warrior Lady was your spot removal. That in Exile for us. Then we have the 2 copies of Magician of Faith, because these were bringing back all of your spells cards from your graveyard, whether they were normal, quick play, continuous, equipped. Magician of Faith to bring it in. Most people ran to Magician of Faith because of the fact Magician of Faith at 3 was very scary to deal with. It was a very scary thing to do because of one situation. Your opponent is also playing Nobleman of Crossout, and they can even cross out their own monsters. So you can cross out your Magician of Faith, and if your opponent still has Magician of Faith in the deck that they did not draw into, or not already on the field, or in the grave, they're getting banished. Yeah, so that was the reason why most people just ran to Moth. Maybe some were probably playing 3 just to say, okay, if you can do this, I can do this against you. I remember one time I actually ended up crossing out my own Magician of Faith, just to not only piss off my opponent, but to make sure that they couldn't have their Magician of Faith. But I had my other one already ready. So then we have, into our Dark Monsters, we have D-Mawk, who known as Dark Magician of Chaos. No low dedication through light and darkness in here. No, we were tribute summoning this guy. And when his card was normal access summoned, just like Magician of Faith, he was able to get back any spell card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. Then on top of that, if he battled an opponent's monster and destroyed it, the monster was banished itself. And if he left the field, he was banished. So the thing about D-Mawk was that you were able to summon this monster because of how many monsters you were already trying to flood the board with. Even if you didn't flood the board, you were discarding him off of many effects, and then being able to special summon him from the graveyard with cards like Premature Burial or Call of the Haunted. D-Mawk's ability to banish things was a great help as well, because if you could destroy it and banish it out the way, that was one less that you had to deal with. So, shout outs to the D-Mawk. Also, Dimension Fusion, I think, was also coming out at this point in time, and that was a nasty combination there, because you could just summon back your D-Mawk. See Airblade Turbo. Next up is Genzo, and Genzo was a easy to tribute summon monster, who basically said no to trap cards. While also being ran at the time, World Decree was also seeing some play. Genzo himself was just a decent enough beat stick that, well, trap cards were nothing that Genzo was afraid of. Even to the point where people were running cards like Rush Recklessly to try to buff up Genzo, because Genzo's other threat was our boy Summon Skull, who was also an easy to free tribute summon monster. And because of that situation, most people were running things like Book of Moon as well to deal with the Summon Skull that you had to easily run over with your Genzo, who had more attack than he had defense. Exarian Universe, another piercing battle damage monster that was coming into the game. And the other thing about Exarian Universe is that when he attacked the defense position monster, you lost 400 points. But equip this guy with some really good cards, and you were basically stacking him on to being a big beat stick. For those who are also wondering, yeah, were cards like that around? Yeah, United We Stand and Mage Power were out. They were limited to 1 because you could just equip them to help LTK your opponent. Yeah, it was that nasty. And stuff like Fairy Meteor Crush and Meteor Rain did exist, but a lot of people didn't want to play them because a lot of times cards were just floating all over the place. So you didn't want to float around too many cards and then lose out on things. Alright, next up, Breaker the Magical Warrior, spot removal for your spells and traps. And a decent enough Dark Attribute monster as well. Our first recruiter, and probably the only one, because I don't know why people didn't run Shining Elf, but I guess because there weren't that many targets that you wanted to bring onto the board. Mystic Tomato was seen because he can bring out your Spirit Reaper, he can bring out your Sangan, from the deck, and then those monsters can be used for either a wall or being able to contribute it so that you can then search off of Sangan's ability. Yeah, Tomato was rocking some things at that point. Tsukuyomi, the other spirit monster that was being played. Suku's ability was to flip cards face down, and then flip monsters face down, and then be able for you, the player, to either flip them up or to absorb them with your Thousand Eyes Restrict. Funny enough, with Thousand Eyes Restrict, that was a combo there in part of Goat Control, where you would, like I said earlier, summon the Thousand Eyes, take one of your opponent's monsters, flip it with the Suku, then flip it back up so the Thousand Eyes can take another monster. Note that Tsukuyomi's only real purpose of that was just to be Book of Moon on legs, but hey, that was still enough to kill things in the format because most of them didn't have really good defense. Spirit Reaper was the wall of choice in being battle immune was definitely a game changer. Its counterpart, the Marshmallow, didn't come out till a bit later, but still was helping out wrecking things at that point as well. And Reaper was definitely a nightmare to handle. Which is why they put it at 1. Sangan was also at 1 at that point because there was just too many good cards to search for that had 15 or less defense, even to the point of now, where Sangan had to have a Arata attached to it, just like its counterpart, Witch of the Black Forest, where they can search for these monsters with 15 or less attack or defense, but their effects cannot be activated. So, and cards with that shared that name cannot be activated, so things cannot go too crazy. Sinister Serpent was just a free discard and even free tribute for a lot of things, and Serpent was such a menace. Oh my god. There's a lot of cards in the game that could have discard costs. Serpent was definitely one of your freebies because you got Serpent back during your next standby phase. And remember, Serpent's standby phase effect had to be errata to even bring it back because of how crazy it became. And then Tribe Infecting Virus, who was just another way of clearing the board. Discard a card from your hand, choose a type of monster that's on the field, choose a type, and destroy all those monsters on the field of that typing. Alright, now that we've gone through my plethora of monsters, we can now go into my plethora of spells. So, the double Scapegoat. Goat were tokens that you summon to the field. They were all level 1 Earth Attribute Beast type monsters, 0 attack and defense. Although the monsters cannot be tributed for a tribute summon, they were still used to tribute to summon other things, such as stuff like Metamorphosis. To summon out your monsters from your extra deck. Primarily your Thousand Eyes Restrict. They're a great wall to deal with your opponent's monsters, although most of your opponents are probably finding ways to get over those, such as using cards like Exarching Universe, Ashura Priest, tributing to summon Aeronite Parshaft, and many things like that. Goat took over the format because of how easy it was to summon these tokens on your opponent's end phase, and then playing cards like your Metamorphosis to then tribute off those tokens to help you go get your Thousand Eyes. We have the Nobleman of Crossout that was able to banish monsters your opponent had face down. Booking some of your opponent's monsters face down was also a way to activate Crossout, and even crossing out some of yours like your Magician of Faith, so that your opponent cannot use their Magician of Faith in the duel. Yeah, Nobleman of Crossout was that nasty, to the point they had to semi-limit this card because of how nasty it was getting. Funny enough, its counterpart, the Nobleman of Extermination, wasn't that much of a threat because it only hit back row, and most of the time you were already hitting traps. So with all the spell and trap removal that there was, it wasn't as much of an issue to deal with or counteractive as its counterpart, the Nobleman of Crossout. Metamorphosis, and I only have one Metamorphosis, but Meta itself was able to, like I said, do the things it did with Thousand Eyes to put it onto the board. But it wasn't just Thousand Eyes you can do. There's a plethora of extra deck monsters, fusion monsters in the time which you can get, such as Gatling Dragon, Ryu Senshi. Yeah, just a whole plethora of things. And it was just easy to get big monsters to get bigger monsters to just, get over things. That's how Yu-Gi-Oh! Was. For draw power, you had both Graceful Charity and you have Pot of Greed. You had hand Disruption and Delinquent Duo, Confiscation, and even Spirit Reaper. To take your opponent's monsters, you had Brain Control and even Snatch Steal, because Change Your Heart at the time was forbidden. From back row removal, because Duster was banned, you had MST, Heavy Storm, and Giant True Knave. Then you had Prima to bring your monsters back, Book of Moon to put some very powerful monsters face down. Alright, that is all of the spells. Then for the trap cards, Ring of Destruction as another way of removal and inflicting some burn damage. Dust Tornado, in case you can get your MST or True Nade or Heavy. And yeah, people were playing Imperial Order, so this card was definitely seeing some play to help out with that. Call on Haunted to bring back monsters similar to Prima. Sakuratsu Armor and Mirror Force to deal with battle phase monsters. Torrential Tribute to wipe out the board if needed. And Trap Hole, just as another stick to dealing with cards. You could play Bottomless Trap Hole, but Bottomless didn't really see much of its interaction with things until cards like Vampire Lord started hitting the scene, and then that became its own little issue. But I think some people did side in Bottomless for that. So let's go into my little variation of fusion deck. Without much explanation. I already talked about this monster, but we're just going to show him off anyway. Thousand Eyes Restrict. Darkland Fire Dragon is just another one of those mini targets you can use for Metamorphosis, just so that you could bring out a dark monster and tribute it for things. The other one is Camion Wizard, which I think more so that was just because of the video games that you could play Camion Wizard. But Camion Wizard was illegal in the OCG, so because of the restrictions of TCG and OCG at that time in terms of cards, you couldn't use a lot of the fusion monsters that were already in Japan. You couldn't use them in the TCG unless the TCG decided to print them. So, yeah, that was the thing. Dark Boulder, the Terrible, was a monster who was able to deal with normal traps and negate them, and also dealt with monsters who were having their effects that he battled with. Basically, kind of similar to Dark Ruler Hades, or Hadass, as most people called him at that point. Kind of, actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think this was a monster who did, and eventually a storyline became that monster. Next up, similar to it, was the Fiend Skull Dragon, who instead of dealing with spells, it dealt with traps, and destroyed them. If they targeted monsters, if I'm not mistaken. Ryu Senshi, also another target monster target spell or trap thing as well. And then Reaper on the Nightmare for easy, quick damage, but also a monster who was easy to tribute off of as well. So yeah, that's pretty much just my version of Chaos Goat. I'm sure many of you have your own versions and regulations to how you run your deck. And trust me, there are many of them that you can easily find online. I only did this because I was really stressed out from dealing with, of course, all the other things that I've been dealing with. But hopefully, sooner or later, I will be able to drop some more of those decks when needed. And I'm going to be working on a couple of those as well. So, yeah, look out for those as soon as you possibly can. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I know this is one of my long deck profiles, but I do my best to try to keep this as short as possible. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel because it helps me out tremendously. You can hit the notification bell to be informed of when I upload my content to the channel. My socials are in the description box below. And with that said and done, thanks everyone for watching. HPJ signing out.